Before 9/11, how U.S. prisons became breeding grounds for terror. True crime documentary. Sirens cut through the quiet streets of Los Angeles in the early morning hours of August 2005. Armed federal agents rushed a small apartment, shouting commands as doors were kicked in. Inside, they found men dressed in dark clothing, weapons nearby, and plans that spoke of war. This was not a random police raid. The men inside were preparing attacks on military bases, synagogues, and crowded public places. What made this moment even more shocking was not just what they planned to do, but where it all began. The roots of this terror plot traced back to a California state prison years before 9/11, hidden in plain sight behind steel bars and locked doors. As agents led the suspects away in handcuffs, one question echoed through law enforcement circles. How did this begin inside a prison long before America understood the threat it faced? Years earlier, far from flashing lights and gunfire, the story began inside New Folsom Prison in California. In the late 1990s, an inmate named Kevin James was serving time for armed robbery. On the outside, he was a street criminal. On the inside, he became something far more dangerous. While behind bars, James began preaching a violent form of extremist belief to other inmates. He spoke about enemies, holy war, and revenge. He told men who felt lost, angry, or broken that they had a higher purpose. In prison yards and cells, his words spread quietly. James formed a group he called Jamiat-ul-Islam is-Sahih. To outsiders, it sounded harmless. Inside the prison, it became a tightly controlled group built on fear, loyalty, and extreme ideas. Members followed strict rules. They trained their bodies and minds. They talked about violence not as a crime, but as a duty. Prison officials saw pieces of this activity, but did not yet fully understand what it could become. At that time, the idea that a terror cell could grow inside an American prison felt unreal. When Kevin James was released in 2004, the prison doors opened, but the danger did not stay locked inside. His ideas went with him. On the outside, his followers reconnected. One of them, LeVar Washington, took the beliefs even further. The group began planning real attacks. They talked about shooting soldiers at military bases. They talked about bombing buildings. They believed they were soldiers in a hidden war. All of it, law enforcement later learned, had its roots in conversations that began behind bars years earlier. What made this case historic was timing. This radical prison group formed before 9/11, before the attacks that changed America forever. Back then, prisons were not seen as possible starting points for terrorism. Guards were trained to stop fights, drugs, and escapes, not extremist recruitment. The system was not ready. That blind spot allowed dangerous ideas to grow quietly. In 2005, a violent robbery meant to fund the group's plans went wrong. A gas station owner fought back and shot Washington. That single moment cracked the case open. Police searched Washington's home and uncovered weapons, maps, and plans. The FBI stepped in. Surveillance followed. Informants talked. Slowly, the full picture emerged. A terror cell had been born in prison, matured in silence, and nearly struck American targets. As arrests followed, officials realized this was not an isolated problem. The Jamiat-ul-Islam is-Sahih case became one of the earliest warnings that prisons could be breeding grounds for extremism, even before 9/11 changed the national mindset.
But one question still lingered as the suspects faced life sentences. If this group was stopped just in time, how many others had gone unnoticed? And how many dangerous ideas were still locked behind bars, waiting for the right moment to escape? In the next chapter, the story goes deeper into the prison walls, where warning signs were missed and silence became the most dangerous weapon of all. The concrete corridor echoed with shouting as correctional officers rushed toward a locked cell block. An inmate lay bleeding on the floor, attacked with a homemade weapon. The fight was not random, it was ordered. This act of violence was meant to send a message inside the prison walls. Loyalty was demanded, obedience was enforced, and anyone who questioned the growing extremist group would pay the price. Long before the world heard the words war on terror, prisons were already becoming quiet battlefields. Inside New Folsom Prison in the late 1990s, tension was rising. Guards noticed small changes. Certain inmates stopped mixing with others. They followed strict routines. They spoke in coded language. Kevin James was at the center of it all. He was not the loudest man in the yard, but he was the most listened to. He spoke calmly, with confidence, and he promised meaning to men who felt forgotten. Many inmates were serving long sentences. Some had no family left. James gave them something powerful. He gave them identity. What made this group dangerous was how organized it became. This was not just talk. Members took oaths. They studied ideology together. They trained physically whenever they could. They believed prison was not punishment, but preparation. The walls did not break their spirit. They believed the walls were shaping them for a future fight. To the prison system at the time, this looked like religious study mixed with gang behavior. Officials did not yet see it as terrorism. Outside the prison, America was focused on street crime and drugs. Terrorism felt distant, something that happened overseas. The idea that a domestic terror group could be forming inside a U.S. prison seemed impossible. Because of that, the warning signs were missed. No special unit tracked extremist beliefs. No system connected prison behavior to future terror risk. The silence allowed the group to grow stronger. When Kevin James was released, the prison lost control, but the ideology escaped. He returned to the streets of Los Angeles and quickly reconnected with former inmates. These men trusted him more than anyone else. They had suffered together behind bars. That bond was strong. James continued teaching them, reminding them of their mission. He encouraged discipline and secrecy. Meetings were held quietly. Plans were spoken softly. LeVar Washington became one of the most committed followers. He believed action was needed. The group began to see violence as the next step. They talked about attacking military bases because they saw soldiers as enemies. They talked about synagogues and public buildings. They believed fear was a weapon. They believed their cause was just. None of this thinking appeared overnight. It had been shaped slowly, day by day, inside a prison years before 9/11. Then came the robbery. The group needed money to move forward. Weapons, supplies, and travel all cost cash. Washington attempted an armed robbery, believing it was part of a greater mission. Instead, it became a turning point. The store owner fought back and shot him. Washington survived, but the plan collapsed. Police searching his home found evidence that did not match a simple robbery. Maps, weapons, writings. The case suddenly felt much bigger.
Federal agents stepped in. As they dug deeper, they traced the group's roots back to prison. Interviews with former inmates painted a clear picture. What began as extremist talk behind bars had become a real threat on the outside. Prosecutors later described the group as one of the most serious domestic terror threats uncovered in California at that time. And it all started before 9/11, before America was ready to see such danger. The arrests that followed shocked the public. Many asked the same question: how could this happen without anyone stopping it earlier? Law enforcement admitted the truth. They did not have the tools or training to detect prison-based radicalization back then. This case became a lesson written in fear and near disaster. But as officials focused on this one group, another realization surfaced. Kevin James was not the only inmate preaching extremist beliefs. Other prisons had similar warning signs. Other inmates were listening, and some of them had not yet been identified. As courtrooms filled and sentences were handed down, a darker concern began to grow. If this was only the case they caught, what was still hiding inside America's prison system? The courtroom fell silent as the judge read out life sentences. Families of victims listened closely. Federal agents stood still, knowing how close the country had come to another tragedy. The men from the prison-born terror cell were finally stopped. But as the doors of the courtroom closed, a darker truth became clear. This was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of a much larger problem hidden deep inside America's prison system. After the Jamiat-ul-Islam-is-Sahih case, federal investigators began looking backward. They asked a hard question: were there other terror links that started in prisons before 9/11? The answer was yes. One of the most alarming examples involved Ramzi Youssef, the mastermind behind the 1993 World Trade Center bombing. While Youssef did not build his plot inside a U.S. prison, his capture and imprisonment revealed something frightening. He used time in custody to share extremist ideas and influence others. His case showed how even locked cells could not fully stop dangerous thinking from spreading. Another warning sign came from the 1990s rise of extremist prison gangs tied to ideology and violence. Some white supremacist groups used prisons to recruit, train, and plan attacks once members were released. These groups mixed hate, discipline, and loyalty. They taught inmates that violence was justified. While not all were labeled terrorists at the time, their actions caused fear and targeted violence that matched terror tactics. Once again, prison walls failed to contain the threat. Before 9/11, prisons were not prepared for this kind of danger. Guards were trained to look for knives, drugs, and fights, not extremist beliefs. Religious study was protected, and rightly so, but this protection was sometimes abused by those pushing violence. Without clear rules or training, officers struggled to tell the difference. Extremist leaders used calm voices and patience. They waited, they watched, they chose recruits carefully.
Experts later explained why prisons were such powerful places for radical ideas. Many inmates felt angry, ashamed, or abandoned. They wanted meaning, they wanted respect. Extremist leaders offered simple answers. They blamed enemies, they promised power. In an environment where control is everything, that message could be dangerously strong. After 9/11, everything changed. The attacks forced the country to look at prisons in a new way. Law enforcement realized that terror threats did not always start on the outside. Sometimes they started in silence, in a shared cell, or during quiet conversations in a prison yard. New systems were created. Inmates convicted of terrorism were isolated. Communication was monitored. Officers were trained to spot signs of radicalization. But those changes came too late for the early cases. The pre-9/11 prison terror links remain historic because they happened when no one was watching closely. They proved that terrorism does not need open borders or battlefields to grow. Sometimes it grows in locked rooms, behind concrete walls, long before the world is ready to see it. The Jamiat-ul-Islam-is-Sahih case became a lesson taught in training rooms across the country. It showed how one inmate's ideas could turn into a real threat. It showed how silence and delay could almost lead to disaster. Most of all, it showed that prisons are not just places of punishment. They can also be places where dangerous beliefs are born. Today, experts warn that the risk has not disappeared. New ideologies replace old ones. New leaders take the place of those sentenced to life. The system is stronger, but it is not perfect. Every day, officers walk the same halls where earlier warnings were missed. Every day, they watch for signs that history might repeat itself. As the final prison doors close for the night, one truth remains unsettling. Terror does not always arrive with explosions and headlines. Sometimes it begins quietly, years earlier, in places meant to keep the public safe. And as long as prisons hold people searching for meaning, the question still hangs in the air. Is the next threat already locked inside, waiting for the right moment to break free? The lights flickered in the maximum security prison cell as guards made their rounds. Behind one heavy steel door, an inmate sat silently, reading a book with notes scribbled in the margins. On the surface, he appeared calm, even compliant, but inside, his mind was active, tracing the paths of influence he could wield once released. This was the same pattern seen decades earlier in the pre-9/11 cases. Extremism does not vanish behind bars. It adapts, waiting for opportunity. And officials knew all too well that one mistake could have devastating consequences. After the Jamiat-ul-Islam-is-Sahih arrests, federal authorities began studying how extremism formed inside U.S. prisons. They realized radical ideas were rarely loud or obvious at first. They often started with quiet conversations, subtle gestures, and small acts of loyalty that seemed harmless at the time. Inmates with past criminal experience and new ideological beliefs formed networks, mentoring younger or more impressionable prisoners. Sometimes these networks went undetected for years, quietly spreading dangerous ideology from cell to cell. The pre-9/11 cases had already proven that the system could miss these warning signs entirely. Training programs for correctional officers changed dramatically after 9/11. Guards learned to watch not just for fights or contraband, but also for behavioral changes, unusual communication patterns, and signs of clandestine recruitment. Intelligence sharing between prisons and federal law enforcement became routine. Yet, experts warned that vigilance could never stop the natural flow of influence. Just as Kevin James had quietly recruited inside New Folsom Prison, new inmates would always attempt to build their own networks if the opportunity arose. It was a constant race against time, awareness, and human cunning. Despite all the precautions, the legacy of pre-9/11 prison terror links remained a haunting reminder. Each case taught authorities that even a single influential inmate could impact national security. Extremism is not limited by walls. It spreads quietly, invisibly, and often where no one expects it. Officials could monitor communications, separate high-risk prisoners, and intervene when suspicious behavior emerged. But the underlying vulnerability of human minds inside a confined system could never be fully eliminated. In recent years, counterterrorism units have continued to study historic prison cases to better predict potential threats. They examine communication patterns, recruitment methods, and behavioral signs. They also try to understand motivation, why certain individuals are more susceptible to extremist ideas, and how prisons can reduce that risk without infringing on legal rights. Each study draws directly from the lessons of the pre-9/11 cases, proving that history remains the best teacher. As night falls across federal and state prisons, the quiet hum of fluorescent lights masks an unsettling truth. Extremism is patient, it observes, it waits. And while law enforcement and correctional systems may have learned from past failures, there is no guarantee the next radical mind won't find the cracks in the system. The question lingers, silent yet heavy. Could another prison-born threat already be forming, hidden behind walls, waiting for its moment to emerge into the world? The story of pre-9/11 prison terror links serves as both a warning and a lesson. It proves that the danger of radicalization inside prisons is real, historical, and ongoing. And it leaves viewers with a chilling realization. The past may be behind bars, but the threat it exposed is always ahead, ready to challenge vigilance in ways that history has already hinted at. As the prison gates lock for the night and silence settles over concrete corridors, one truth remains clear. The walls meant to protect society do not always contain the dangers within. Extremism can grow quietly, patiently, and without notice, leaving only the echoes of warning signs for those who know where to look. The pre-9/11 cases remind us that the seeds of terror are often planted long before the headlines arrive. History has shown the cost of overlooking the quiet threats inside prisons, and the lessons are still relevant today. Every guard, every inmate, every corridor holds the potential for influence, for radical ideas to take root. While systems have improved, the risk has not vanished. The shadows of the past continue to stretch into the present, challenging authorities and society alike to remain vigilant. The question lingers, haunting and unresolved. How many ideas, how many networks, how many dangerous plans are already forming behind bars, waiting for the right moment to emerge into the world? Only time and careful watchfulness will tell. But one thing is certain, history will keep teaching its lessons, and the story of prison-born extremism is far from over.